Hey, I'm Taylor Dorsett, and this is the Professional Technical Interviewee. Technical interviews are hard, and every company does them differently. On this show, I interview engineering leaders to see what they look for in technical candidates, and then they perform a real technical interview with me. My guest today is Cornelius Jamison. He is currently a principal data engineer at Coyote Logistics and works as a consultant for the Washington Post. We talk about the importance of networking, what he is looking for during technical interviews, and advice for engineers who are looking for their next job.
Hello, Cornelius. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned before we started talking, we've known each other for a couple of years, so it's nice to finally actually talk a little more in depth. My guest today is Cornelius Jemison, currently a principal data engineer at Coyote Logistics. You also consult for the Washington Post. Previously, you worked at Nielsen and ActiveCampaign and principal and staff level engineering roles. So lots of big names on the resume. It seems like impressive, probably data focused work and a lot of really complex stuff you've done over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an exciting journey. I've been in the tech industry here in Chicago for over 20 years, working with startups really for the last 8 or 9 years, maybe 10. Time has gone by so fast. But yeah, it's been a really fun time.
Yeah, great. Can you share a little bit more about your team and kind of what you focus on at either of your roles here?
Sure. At Coyote Logistics, I'm the principal data engineer for our business intelligence and data science group. I was brought in through a friend that I worked at previously at Nielsen, and I love working for him. He's a really good, smart engineer and manager, and got the opportunity to come and interview with him to lead them into their next phase of digital transformation. Right now, I oversee or lead or manage 2 engineers, and then our team is really helping them focus on getting to the cloud. So deploying either to Databricks on Azure, or deploying to Kubernetes, AKS, and other Lambda functions as a service platform to be able to support a lot of the data science modeling and projections for our business. Coyote Logistics is owned by UPS. It's a subsidiary. And so we deal really more on their freight side, and we handle a lot of their business operations from us.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize how much data work is involved within the logistics space, right? When I was in recruiting, a lot of my work focused on logistics tech companies, and it seems like over the last 5 years, maybe even 10 years, there's been a huge push towards we have to actually understand the data that we have and utilize that, right? Because there's so much out there, and so much that they can do with it, right? If you can predict a truck's going to be late before the driver might even know that, right? That's hugely beneficial.
This is where our team's really going to, using correlation data like weather, traffic notifications, dealing with VRP algorithms and understanding how to really project those things in addition to those 2 other components to provide the best service. There's a huge opportunity here for logistics. It's one of those things where you see Uber and others get involved with it here in Chicago. And the opportunity is for the person that knows how to make sense of the data and provides it in a meaningful way to the users. And it's really a strange industry in the sense that it's so customer focus driven. A lot of your customers don't have any background using computers or mobile devices. And so a lot of it's done on phone. They tell you where they're at, they tell you where they're going to be. You kind of project from there with how long it's going to take them. You're doing routing based off of information that's over the phone. And these guys only operate like that. It's very far in between. You have somebody who might have a smartphone that they want to integrate with. And so it's a huge, huge opportunity for growth.
Yeah, at risk of getting into the weeds, I used to do a lot of work with Project 44, and a lot of their focus in Chicago was just moving people from EDI technology, right, to API technology, which seems like that should have already been done, right? But it's just one of those areas where, especially in logistics, if it's not broke, no one's going to fix it, right? So.
Right. And it's one of those things where change has to be slow and it has to be meaningful. And you're not going to see that ROI right away when you're going to see this fantastic new thing, and it's providing, tons of resources and enhancing the lives of a lot of these drivers out there. And then on the tail end of it, you got Tesla too that are coming in with these automated trucks that are coming too. So it's a huge market and huge opportunity for us to start to see how technology has a great influence.
Yeah, I love the logistics space. I think it's one of Chicago's strong suits, especially the logistics tech, and it has a very Chicago focused thing of kind of an unsexy area, right? That people can tackle. So it's something that I think I'm endlessly fascinated by. And you mentioned you ended up in this role based on a connection with the manager in the past, right? So I think that's something I've seen as a common theme, especially in a lot of the engineering leaders that come on the show, is using those connections and less of, I guess when I say that, it feels a little weird, right? Using those connections, but it's more so someone you genuinely enjoyed working with, right? Either reached out to you or you reached out to them, and then that led to a new role, right? Which is something I've seen over and over again of how important it is to have that network, because that's where a lot of your jobs are going to come from in the future.
Yeah. My boss, we happen to be friends. I work with him at Nielsen. We built out a data platform for Walmart, Target, Lowe's, and people, biggest box change stores where we're doing data ingestion for those, anywhere from 50 to 100 petabytes of data every week from every one of those. It was all points of sale type data, and I loved working with him. He gave me the reins to run my team and run his teams the way I wanted to. It was offshore and onshore operations. And so it was really nice to be able to talk with him. We ended up spending lots and lots of time together beyond just the tech. And so the relationships that you build is really beyond just your normal coding and, infrastructure as a code operations and, just daily task assignments. It's really about building those relationships with you and the business. And for me, it was just, he said, I'm going through this opportunity. Would you like to come? I was like, sure. And so within a month, I had an offer. It was really nice.
Nice. That's awesome. Can you, I guess, if you've done technical interviews on either side of the table, can you share a little bit more about that?
I have interviewed engineers and I have been interviewed. I've been on both sides of the table where I've gone and taken interviews that I thought I had and I did really well at. I thought, like, man, there's no way that I didn't get that. And then I'd come back and I find I didn't get it. And then I've been in interviews and I thought, like, I did really horrible and they love me. And it goes both ways, Yeah. Interview is kind of a nuance. Every organization does it its own way. Some of it's coding, some of it's more conversational. It really depends. At my level, it's more conversational, more about leadership and how do I interact with business. But and then less so much about the technical part. But I get involved with that. Sometimes I have to write code. Most times I don't. I mean, there's a couple of spot ones where I wrote some really, really complicated code that I thought, like, man, there's no way this is an interview question. Because it took me a couple of days to write. And then other ones I was just like, oh, this should not have been an interview question. So I've been on both sides.
Yeah, those leak code hard questions, right? Where you go, why does anyone need to know this?
Why is the word like one I can think of is, that parking service called Spot On or not Spotify, but it's here in Chicago.
Parking Spot.
Yeah, parking spots. Yeah. And so I got this question. I was just like, this is insane. There's no way that I can be answering this one day. I was like, well, I need a couple more days. But it was really hard. It's like managing spots of parking cars, and there was some time gap things, and it had to make sense from UTC time versus PST versus CDT. And it was just like, oh my goodness, this is so complicated. And some of them are horrible, some are good. I think the interview thing goes crazy. You can have engineers that are like, hey, are you trying to one up me, or are you trying to gauge what I actually understand and know? It's always weird.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's a disconnect too from whoever designs the interview process to who's actually doing the interviews, right? If your VP of engineering, CTO, or even a manager, right, designs this interview process, they think, great, this is measured and has the right approach, and then they send a senior lead engineer to go do it, and that person doesn't necessarily have all the context, maybe the nuance of what was being looked for with those questions. They just kind of pile things on, right? I think the larger the company gets to, the more difficult it is to keep reins on that, because you have, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 interviewers all of a sudden, and it's hard to actually spot check that, right? So I'm curious, what are you looking for? What are you typically evaluating for when you're interviewing for your team?
I look for personality, and then I look for not necessarily skill set, because it depends on the role. Let me put it that way. Like if I'm interviewing an SC1 or an SC2, I just want to know that they know the basic biz buzz. Can they write logic? Can they understand, how a program flow goes? I'm looking for how they deal with tough questions and how they answer questions. I'm looking for when they're whiteboarding, like, hey, they're going to ask me any questions about the question to really define the problem statement and really go back and add to the interview process. I want to interact with you. I want to know who you are as a person as you're solving this problem. And then two, if you can't solve it, I'm not dinging you if you can't solve it, because everybody doesn't perform on cue right away, really hard. But I'm looking for you to have some basic fundamentals. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in computer science, so I'm thinking in terms of the basic questions out of there, like what is a list? What is a delegate? What how do sets work? How do maps work? And then trying to go from there to be able to define, what does the person know? And then two, like how eager they want to learn. Like I remember interviewing someone again about Nielsen. This kid, he had no background, no knowledge, but he was eager. And I was like, I want this kid. I want him on my team. And I remember thinking like he had the capability of learning, even though he didn't know all the answers to the questions. And I've been like, yeah, let's come in. And then I've interviewed senior engineers that have gotten all the answers correct. And their attitude was really poor, very prideful. And then two, like, how willing are they to get involved and teach others and mentor others? My expectation is not that engineers become trainers, because I think that's a separate role. But my understanding is that, hey, if someone has a problem, are you willing to stay late to help them resolve it? Are you willing to sit with them for a day or two to help them get through those issues? Those things are the most important things to me.
Yeah, that's something it's so difficult to try to keep in mind that, yes, obviously having a solution to this question is great, right? But there's so much more that goes into an interview, right? And so much more that someone's looking for when you're actually being interviewed, right? Because again, you're looking for someone who you're actually going to work with, right? Not just someone who you're going to hand a question to and expect them to spit out an answer and you go, great, now I can continue with my work, right? You're looking for a teammate. And I think that's insightful too, as how you may interview as a manager, right? You're actually looking for people who probably going to work well together, that you get along with, but also hopefully will get along with others on the team.
Right. Team camaraderie is really there. One person reminded me this probably like almost 12 years ago, and I've always thought about it. It's not about the technology, it's about the relationship you share with people while solving these technical problems. And, you can create a really cool environment where, everyone's getting along and, might not have the real technical proficiency, but everybody can learn that. Anybody can learn how to do what I do,
Yep.
Given enough time and love, tenacity to really go after it. It's the relationship part that's going to really be the determining factor of success in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think Tyler Jefford, who's an engineering manager over at Venmo now, he's at Innova for a long time, told me one time, he goes, at the end of the day, it's all people problems, right? Like software, you could teach someone how to code, but it's people at the end of the day, especially as you scale, because you're just trying to hire more people, right? It's not necessarily you're trying to hire for expertise, you need to hire people, right? And that I think sometimes gets difficult to keep in mind when you're interviewing.
Yeah, I mean, even as a team, I even get it wrong sometimes too. Like in my interactions, I had to come back and apologize a couple of weeks ago about something that went wrong. I thought it was completely right in the situation, but I left the other person feeling uncomfortable about it. And it's a learning experience. And being able to have the ability to say, I'm sorry, and, go back and make things right is really huge. There are no enduring relationships without any apologies. And there are no enduring relationships where people are not willing to give and take to make things work. So it's really important, that relationship aspect of being an engineer, because you're going to spend hours with this. I mean, I can't believe how many times I spent a 12-hour day working on a problem with someone, and it's really crucial, that you maintain a level of professionalism, you have a level of empathy about the person that's solving it, and that you keep on trying to challenge each other to really find the right correct solution to solve the problem.
Yeah, empathy, I think, is the key word there, right? It's such a, I don't know. I came from what I feel like was a very low empathy industry is recruiting, right? And engineering, maybe it's got a little bit more, but still, there, I think it is a fairly low empathy industry, and it's something that so difficult to find, and I think hard to screen for, right? If you're interviewing, just trying to figure out, does this person have empathy, and I guess vice versa. If you're on the other side of the table, is this going to be someone who I think is going to have empathy for me when I'm in this role? So
Right.
I'm curious if you have a standardized system of doing technicals. Obviously, you mentioned it kind of changes role to role, right? Depending on what you're looking for. Do you have a standardized interview process?
Usually I'll get in and ask questions about their resume, ask them about the background, ask them what kind of current projects they're currently going into, ask them if they have any questions, do they need water, do they need a bathroom break. You know, the level of interviews lately have been through Zoom or Google Hangouts lately because of just COVID and everything. But in terms of that, it's just then going into the programming questions. Giving, usually I give everybody Fields Buzz. Usually Fields Buzz knocks people out really quickly. Just like, okay, you can go, let's start from before. Can you do this? I'll ratchet up the level of the complexity there. Like, how do I add this buzz to an API?
Oh, interesting.
Normal RESTful API, and then given a value, a random value there, how can I put that out? Then we start talking about REST and what is it? What is the HTTP protocol? What are some of the verbs they're used with for actions? What are give me some idea about JSON. Give me some ideas about data encapsulation beyond JSON. Just small questions about that. Then we start, I'll ask questions about databases. I'll ask questions about message queues. I'll ask questions about distributed computing. I'll ask all kinds of questions in that regard to see where they gauge that. Some, if it's a junior engineer, then I can know most of these topics. But if it's a senior engineer, we'll get into 12-factor apps. What does it mean to keep an application up and running? Tell me your background with monitoring and system telemetry. What tools have you used with those things? What ways have you used Kubernetes? Have you used any data warehouses like Redshift or Oracle or even Microsoft's products? Tell me some of your backgrounds with some of those things. So it depends on where the person goes. I just want to always give them an opportunity to showcase what they know and then just try to figure out what they don't know. And then at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I have a set of problems that I need to solve for a team or for on behalf of a manager. If they're not on my team, and do they have the skill sets to meet that role? And it's really just going back to other manager and team, like, okay, what am I looking for? What kind of problems are you guys solving at this time? What kind of things are you guys working on? And what kind of skill sets do you need for that team member? Is this an opportunity to grow someone who doesn't have any background in tech? And this is a growth for the company. We need to grow our company and skill sets. Or is this where we need somebody to be an SME and really get in and get the ground on, and we need to be efficient within the first week or two to start contributing. It really depends. It depends on what's needed for the role, and then the questions get asked.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like basically you're trying to get a kind of a broad sense of where their knowledge lies, and then probing more specifically into certain areas. If you feel like they have some expertise there, then let's dive deeper, right, and see how much, right? If it's kind of a shallower area for them, then maybe you don't need to focus on that area as much, correct?
Yeah. Like if we're focusing on, let's say, Kafka and distributed messaging, like I'm not going to go hardcore into the database. Somebody ask some questions just because of the tooling and how do you connect to like a CDC, change data capture to be able to capture that into a message queue or a message channel. And then I might leave databases alone. But if we're dealing with, a two-tier app where we have a web application and it needs to communicate the database, like how is that? How are you going to be writing code for that? Whether it be Python, Java, Scala, Kotlin, whatever the language is, Go. Help me understand how this works, and how would you scale this application? It really depends. It all depends on what's being asked, what's the level of expertise. We could be talking to somebody who's doing data scientists or data engineering. How do you build a data lake? What's the first step in building a data lake? What does your canonical model look like? What are you doing to keep your data together? How are you exposing this to tools like Snowflake and Synapse and other tools like Athena? Like, it really depends on what's being asked.
Yeah.
It's really just situational based questions.
Yeah, I like that style of interviewing a lot. I used to prep candidates when I was in recruiting around if I knew someone interviewed like that, like they're not trying to ask you gotcha questions, right? They're just trying to push you to the edge of your knowledge. Then I think some people get freaked out when they go, "Oh, I said I don't know," right? Or like I wasn't sure when they asked a couple questions. Like that's the goal, right? They just want to see how far kind of down that path you are, and then they'll move on to something else. And I like that style of interviewing. I think some people it worries them if they don't have a perfect answer for every question, right? But I think that's more interview nerves necessarily than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like I don't have time for gotcha questions. I'm not, my job is not to insult you or demean you because you don't know the answers to the question. My thing is like, well, if you don't know, well, like maybe you might ask more intriguing questions. Well, what do you mean by that? Can you clarify?
Yeah.
And then you go into a little bit of depth. You might not have the right terminology or the right verbiage to describe it, but you might know overall what it might be doing. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in interviews where I've not known the verbiage, but I can describe what it's doing. And it got me the job because I knew enough to describe what it was doing, even though I didn't know all the terminology.
Yeah. Hey, so that brings me to my next question. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but how do you think you do a technical interviews? It kind of depends, right? Depends on the type of interview, but how do you think you've done in the past?
I think I've been fair. I think I've gotten them wrong too, when I thought someone wasn't going to contribute. I think I've been overall probably like 90% right, 80 to 90% right about my evaluation of someone. I think the biggest hurdle for me is like whether someone's not really being honest about their background, but they've studied up enough to be able to do the work. I know I've gotten those wrong where someone got placed and I'm just like, I hear from another team like, well, no, they didn't know anything. It's like, well, hold on, you don't need to know them. They passed the interview. And I've been in plenty of interviews where I've seen managers do that too. They thought the person was a perfect fit, got them into the situation and context, and they just really, drowned on what they're doing. So my job is just to really understand who you are as an individual, what you bring to the table, and then try to see if you're a good fit or not.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I get it right. There's times where I've gotten it wrong.
And on the other side of the table, how do you feel when you've been an interviewee?
I've hated it. I don't think anybody likes the pressure of always someone asking. You never know. Like usually within the first set of questions, you know how it's going to do. Like when I interviewed for my last job about 5 months ago, I got in and I was really nervous because I was dealing with data already at my previous role, but I wasn't dealing with necessarily data lakes. I hadn't touched that stuff for about a year or two, but most of it hadn't changed. But when I got into it and I got comfortable and started remembering a lot of the terminology and I remembered a lot of the processes that I was following when I was at Nielsen doing data lake technologies at Azure, it just came back to me. So I don't think anybody wants to be in the hot seat, basically you come in there and sometimes you might have more experience than the other person. And sometimes the other person might have more experience and you have no clue, And so it's always a funny thing. You want to be able to honestly say, hey, I don't know what that means, but if I can tell you what I think it means, you can clarify. And just being open and honest, I think that's always been a good recipe for me. But there's times where I've taken interviews and I've not done them. Lord knows I've done those for roles I really, really wanted. But there's roles that I did get that, being consistent about learning more and growing. And if you don't get the role, always go back and ask, hey, what can I do better to prepare for? What can I do to study more to be able to be at this level? I know I have the capability of doing the work, but it sounds like there's some gap in my knowledge that you don't need to. Some companies respond, some don't. Most don't, But it's the honesty to say, hey, I like to keep you as a known contact. Adding them on LinkedIn, going back and say, hey, can we meet up at some, Chippy or some other startup meetup where we can talk a little bit more so I can have a better understanding about where my knowledge gap is and where I need to grow. And I think people really appreciate that. And they remember you. I've had so many people come back and say, hey, remember we met X, Y, Z, and we should be interested in coming to interview you. And it happens more often than you think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you already done the hard part, right? You got to know someone through the interview process. You already interviewed with them once, and maybe you were, if you're off by 10%, even if you're off by 50%, right? That's something. If you work on that stuff, they remember at least you asked, right? That you wanted to get better, and that's a lot of what people are looking for too.
Yeah, for me, it's always about the learning experience. I'm always willing to pick a book, being really educated, it's always trying to learn from the experience and what can I do better and how can I be a better person. I think that's you should try to do that in every other life.
Yeah, I used to. I worked at Actualize, which is a coding boot camp, as the director of outcomes for a number of years, and helping students get their first job. And I think a lot of people are very frustrated going into interviews where they felt they weren't prepared or they weren't ready, and they probably weren't to some extent. But also, interviewing is different at every company. And I always told them, like, the only way this is a failure is if you come out of it and you haven't learned anything, right? If you've learned something from this interview, at least you're taking that into your next interview. You're probably not going to get your first job, right? The first company interview is very unlikely you get that job, but 3 or 4 or 5 in, much more likely that you've learned something from the interview process. You've learned how to present yourself kind of in a way that they may be looking for, and how to answer those questions that a lot of times are fairly repetitive, right? That's something that I realized in my initial engineering job search was if I actually solved the problems afterwards, right, regardless if I was able to solve them or not, very high likelihood I was going to see that problem again from a company. Because if you're interviewing for similar types of roles, a lot of companies aren't doing something drastically different, right? It's just slightly modified versions of the same types of questions.
Right. I mean, it's very rare going to meet your Googles or Facebooks and Apples in your first interview. Yeah. But it is very similar in the sense that people are going to ask you to probably code, they're probably going to ask you personality questions, they're going to ask you, to expose some of yourself of, some of your flaws. But there's lies opportunity to learn what pattern works for you and what company works for you and what kind of metrics that they're working with that you can really gain from your career and grow from the experience from. So it's always interesting.
Yeah. Do you have any type of...
I was going to say, always keep doing it. Don't just say, well, I didn't get that job, I should just give up and quit. You should just always keep doing it. Because again, like you said, this experience is not the same. And every time, if you keep on being persistent, someone's going to take an opportunity on you.
Yeah, that was another big thing we stressed at Actualize was, I mean, you're one day closer to getting your first job every time, right? And I think the nice part is in engineering, it's not true for necessarily every single person, but the vast majority of people, once you have about 6 months to a year of experience, it is much easier to get the next job and the job after that, right? So it's something that the first one's usually the hardest. Right? Do you have any type of system that you use to break down technical interview questions? Say you get asked something, you go, I have no idea how to solve this, right? Or it's just something that is more complex than maybe FizzBuzz, where you go, okay, I know exactly how to solve this, kind of after just being asked.
The coffee example, coffee is very common in JVM languages. When people will say, hey, you're a vending machine and you want to dispense coffee out. You want to be able to say, add cream for 25 cents, a coffee, certain types of coffee for whatever given amount of currency, and then add those up, solve those values, and then spit out coffee with the bill. That's pretty frequent pattern that I see within the industry for interview questions. I see a lot of my last one was when I was interviewing for Bank of America, and this was years ago. And this was one of the more complicated ones. I had to make an elevator that could traverse elevator floors. And when I did it, it was based off of the elevator could be on any floor, and you had to be able to keep track of what floor you want to go up and down. And I remember it being really elaborate and I remember talking to the engineering manager, only 2 people out of the 20 people solved it. It was in Python. And I was thinking, like, yeah, this is crazy because the way the algorithms were working. Spot Hero was the other company I was talking about earlier. Yeah, theirs was pretty hard. It was more like a time series question of the data. So they can be vastly alike, but the coffee one is the one I usually see quite a bit, like a similar deviations on what that would look like.
Yeah. Do you have any type of approach you use if you hit a technical question that seems very complicated, or do you have steps that you take?
Oh yeah. There's sometimes I go Google it. Like I like, I like those things where you can go and say, hey, take your exam, go home, take a couple days, think about it, come back with a real solution. Make sure you have tests with it. I did one with, I don't remember the name of the company, but I remember I did, it was a logistics company, and I didn't get it, but I remember looking up a bunch of algorithms for loading freight into a truck. And so I had looked up, and it was in Ruby, was the language. I was trying to load the truck up the most efficient way to be able to do it. And I wrote a bunch of code that would take random package sizes based off of a dimension within a truck, loading it the most efficient way in there. And I had to look at those algorithms because I never worked with them. I never worked in logistics. Yeah. So Google's your friend. And then usually there's algorithms out there. You can get, some PhD students someone or somewhere will explain it. You don't have to learn up the math terminologies to do it in algebraic terms, but you can usually, model your way through to figure out how to do it. And there's times, again, I didn't even get that job, and I had to look that up. But I learned something more about package loading to a truck, which is something like Amazon or maybe UPS or FedEx is really interested in.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. Any advice or tips for engineers that are going into technical interviews? Maybe they hate technical interviews, right? Or they've just got a number of them coming up, and they need some words of encouragement.
Oh man, sleep the night before. Don't stress out.
Yeah.
I think you said it earlier. Sometimes you're ready, sometimes you're not. I mean, there's times where I went in not completely ready, and I did okay, but not completely ready. There's times where you can lather all the things that and then you overwhelm the interviewer with your knowledge, and they don't really get a good gauge of what you because you're spitting out a bunch of things. One of the things I always say is don't lie on your resume. Don't lie about your experience. You know what you know, and if you're in the interview room, they want you because that's the first step for them deciding if they really. So don't lie about who you are. Just talk about what you know, don't know. Prepare by doing coding interviews, leak code. I even still do that. I have to do that every couple of months. I just bought a book a couple of weeks ago, where I'm going through these programming exercises. I'm just doing it in Python, even though my role is probably 20 to 40% coding, and the rest more leadership and leading projects. But I'm still coding because I have to be able to do it within Java, Python, the normal languages Go. I mean, just keep coding, keep doing the programming things. And the programming courses online, like LeetCode and others, they give you an opportunity to just keep your mind refreshed on what what that means to be able to use things. And sometimes I walk to an interview, I've not been able to ask the code at all. They want to know about a particular technology they can't really demonstrate. So just know, your basics, understand what a database is, have some familiarity with Linux is. Linux is usually the common operating system that runs the world. Basic languages like PHP, you'd be amazed. PHP does quite a bit, and you can do a lot with it. And most of your websites on the web are running for it. It's not the best language, but Python is usually a staple to have a good understanding of how it works, how to do classes, how to use that. Have some knowledge about functional programming to be able to do that if you're dealing with script-based languages like PHP or Python. Other than that, just keep persistently going to the interview. Don't give up. That's my best advice.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the perseverance is sometimes the hardest part. It's sometimes harder than the interview. It's just, having so many emotions wrapped up in interview processes and hearing no when you want to hear yes so badly, right?
Yeah. I mean, totally been there. Been told no so many times throughout my career, but if the person who's going to get the job is the one who's going to do what it takes is going to get it. And sometimes on that day, you have a really good bad day and do really well. And you have a really good day and do well. I've had those too. It really all depends on what they're trying to go after.
Yeah. Do you have any different advice or additional advice for early career engineers?
Oh man, keep coding. Find a mentor. Find somebody who's already in the industry, already knows it. Go to meetups. Chippy is a great meetup from Python. I have a bunch of friends that go to that one. Find meetups for things that you're interested in. I would say also just keep buying books. Like O'Reilly's books are really, really good. There's the Pack books, PACKT, those books are really good. And then just keep networking. Always keep networking. Go to any career sessions that you can go to, even if they don't have big tech companies there. Let me say this too, because I think this is really important. Just because you don't end up at Google or Facebook or Apple or Amazon on your first bout, and I have friends that, are amazing, amazing engineers, but take those interviews. And, and it's really important that you know that there are other opportunities where people are innovating. They may not be innovating like at Google or Facebook, but there's other opportunities there for you to be able to do those things. And, and if you don't get on those companies, it's really important that you find someplace to be, someplace that's meaningful, someplace that's going to show your talents, and a place that's going to let you grow. But I would say just keep networking, reading books, blogs, meetups. Go talk to folks. I know the world's starting to come back alive again since COVID, but there's still meetups on Zoom and Hangouts that you go meet up, and then go to conferences as much as you can. I know they get expensive, but that's just a good way to keep on networking and to get your name out there. Do presentations, do conferences, talk about tech that you know. People are gonna either correct you, or they're gonna be like cheering you on to see you talk about the things that you're passionate about. So, and eventually a job's gonna come. Someone's gonna come. I know I go to those conferences all the time. Someone's always asking, "Hey, are you looking?" Like, no, I'm not looking, but I know someone who is. But and that's where the opportunity for networking always is.
Yeah, absolutely. That when I was at Actualize, I saw the people who had a brother, an uncle, a family member, someone who was already in technology who could basically kind of help them bridge that gap from hasn't had a technical job to getting their first technical job. I'm one of the people that often found the job first, regardless of their actual skill level. And I really focused on helping students who didn't have that type of network, or already building some type of network. So you can have that uncle or that person, right, who goes, oh, I'm not looking, but I do know someone who's really talented and really wants to learn, right, who might be a good fit for this. And you have to put a lot out there to get that, right? It can't be 5 people you talk to. You might have to talk to 500, right? But eventually it will come along.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Before we move into the interview portion and take a short break here, any interview horror stories you want to share, with the audience?
Oh, I just had finished interviewing with what's the name of the company? The money company starts with an S. Stripe. And I just completely tanked it. The day before, I was doing support up until like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And like all night long, and I was just completely burnt. And what's interesting now is during COVID season, a lot of your interviews are not in person. You go and take them online, and for roles that are remote, like I was looking for. I was like, well, let me go do this and see it. I don't want to cancel it. I made a commitment. Let me go out and do it. First part of the interview, I just completely tanked. It was just a complete nightmare. My mind wasn't thinking. And then towards the end of it, like I was completely gone. I was exhausted. So that's where I go again. I said, just sleep. Either A, you're gonna do well, or B, you're not. And I really wanted the job. I didn't get it, but I learned something from them. Like I need to really spend more time thinking about algorithms. I need to spend more time thinking about things in other languages. And even for me, I'm still learning and growing about things that I know. And so it was just like, okay. I'm not losing any sleep about it. I didn't get it, but there's opportunity for me to grow in those areas.
Yeah, Stripe's one of those that's on par with the Google, Facebook, Amazons of the world with their interview difficulty, and certainly depending on the role, but certainly very algorithm heavy and can have some of those complicated questions. Right, not easy on no sleep.
They asked me to write a JSON parser out of the blue. I was like, why would I write a JSON parser? There's 4 or 5 different varieties of JSON parsers. I'll just go out and grab this one. Like, no, we want you to write one. I was like, well, no, it ain't happening today.
Not today.
But yeah, I take that one. And I admit it. I was like, oh, it was an opportunity to learn. But it doesn't, and one of the things I think sometimes too is like when someone's that's not a reflection of your character, of who you are. It's just a reflection of your current place in life. And that's not to say that you're always going to be there. And everyone grows. Everyone has opportunity. And maybe I might be able to get that job a year from now if I spent more time focused on the algorithms. I just didn't at the time. And so it became a learning stage.
Yeah, and that's something to keep in mind for a lot of people too. There are certain types of companies that interview in certain ways where if you want those jobs, you're probably going to have to study in different ways than other companies or other interviews, especially a Stripe or any Fang type of company, Fang adjacent, right? Typically, they are more algorithm focused, leak code type questions, and you really have to focus on that. And it's almost an entirely different skill than the actual software development, right? And that's a lot of time to spend on that. I used to always say that Amazon, Facebook, Googles of the world don't necessarily want the best engineers, right? They want the best engineers who are going to spend the time to study for their interview process, right? Because that shows a level of commitment to go work for them, right? So it's obviously why they pay a lot of money too, is they'll run people through these processes.
If you know algorithms really well, you usually do well on those interviews. I'm one of those people that I have to go back and study. I will have to go back and look at it. I mean, I would love to work for them one day, the Google, the Amazon, the Fangs of the world. But I also realized too that there are opportunities at other companies. And like, you got to think also too, like how big is the pond you're going to swim in?
Yeah.
Is it going to be a big pond or is it going to be a small pond? Like my current role, I have a big pond because there's opportunities for me to have influences on. If I was going to go to Google and Facebook, I have a small pond and I will be able to focus on small sets of problems. And so for me, like, I love solving problems. I love working with people. I love interaction with people. I just don't want to be in a small pond. I want to be in a big pond. And you figure that out, how that works. And some organizations you might think like are far too technical for you. Like, I don't want to know how this works. In amount of time. Well, in amount of time, like, can you solve it for even smaller amount of time? No, it is what it is. And so some problems you want to solve, some problems you don't. Some things are interesting, some things are not. Like, me writing operating system and kernels, not my thing. Me building systems that interact and communicate, I can do that. It really depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would almost argue there's likely more opportunity to actually create and build and do interesting work at smaller companies than some of those larger companies, because often you don't have a lot of say in where you're slotted, especially if you're just coming in, right? You got to be there several years before you can navigate and work yourself into a team where you're actually doing something interesting. I have kind of this side role where I work with a lot of people who are going into Fang companies, and very regularly the debate is not, should I take this Fang company or this Fang company, and where their offers are at. It's, should I take one of these Fang offers that is going to pay me much more, or this actual interesting offer that I'm going to get paid a fraction of what I would get paid to go work for one of these companies, but I'm actually going to enjoy the work, right? Versus just being one more engineer on the Google Maps team, right? Which maybe there's something interesting there, right? But you're going to push out 3 updates a year.
All right. I don't know. To me, like in my current company, I have people following me everywhere, and I'm okay with that. But the thing is, like, it's never the same. The problems are always changing, and I like that context. But if money is the thing that's driving you, go with the thing that's going to pay you more. You just got to realize that there's going to be some limiting factors too. But like, there's only so far you can go on Google. There's so many, SC5s and SC6s there that you're going to hire into those roles. And like, you got to think like, I'll be in this and looks good on a resume, but what do I do after that? Because I've only done that one particular skill set and not done anything else within the computer science domain. Those whole things are huge factors.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, let's take a break here, and then when we come back, we'll move into the technical portion.
Thank you for watching the first half of the Professional Technical Interviewee. The technical interview will be released 1 week from this episode, so be sure to subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. New episodes are released on the first 4 Thursdays of each month. Find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Dorsett or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. And remember, keep practicing.